Mandalorian just dropped this week, and the first episode totally exceeded my expectations. From the does this feel like Star Wars perspective, this absolutely feels like Star Wars. So much so that it doesn't even rely on the traditional scroll or green and blue font that sets us up for the galaxy far, far away. Nope, it just plants us right in the middle of the story with the Mandalorian on his way to collect a bounty on a mithril. And the show's introduction is amazing. It's just the Mandalorian following a beacon on some snowy planet, and this looked like a movie to me. Oh, and just a heads up, I'll be diving heavy into spoilers for sure, so this is your warning from here on out. So we see a bit of a bar feud going on between a humanoid, a Quarren, and a mithril, and the blast doors open to reveal the Mandalorian. The visual language of this show so far is very similar to Rogue One, and I think it's perfect for evoking a sense of this like seedy underbelly tone. It's like the camera is hiding. It's the vantage point, peeking out from safety. And the setting nailed that original Cantina vibe, but added a much more murkier atmosphere. Like I've said, the show is already pretty much amazing to me, and this aesthetic is very good. Now, the bullies end up antagonizing the Mandalorian, and it ends in their demise. It was beautiful. Nothing was said by the Mandalorian, and in PS, I love when WrestleMania guy calls him Mando. I chuckled a little bit. The Mandalorian just completely dominates every single one of them. He takes out the two humanoids and ends up killing the Quarren by shooting the blast door so that it cuts his body in half. And that's only 2.5 minutes into the episode. When I watched this the second time with my wife, I had it up on my 4K TV, and it was remarkable how this all looks. It's like literally movie quality. The aliens look film quality, and the way the Quarren's face looked was actually really impressive. I was worried that the aliens' faces would be horrible and they would have that weird combination of CGI practical where it just doesn't work. But it worked for some reason, and it was seamless. And the face of that alien was very, very good. My biggest gripe with the sequel trilogy is the lack of this kind of thing. They don't really utilize the androids or aliens that much to this degree, placing them front or center. And I really dislike aliens speaking like they're from the southern United States. So all of this alien speak and actually showing them cut up in the fight was a breath of fresh air. And I get it if that's not your thing at all. I just happen to be obsessed with aliens and like the weird puppet stuff. It's my favorite thing. The interaction with the old school Star Wars alien from the original Star Wars with his flute was so weird, but perfect weird. It made no sense, and that's why I loved it. And the speeders that came out here were fantastic. It was cool to see like a hybrid with a droid kind of being the autopilot for one of these speeders, and they looked like a combination of practical and CGI, and they had that like Solo a Star Wars story quality. And I thought the second speeder that comes up was actually hilarious. It was just like a beat up speeder. You could hear things clanking in there, a piece of it falls off. It reminded me of those things on Crate at the end of the movie The Last Jedi. Super funny. I'll admit that I really disliked the music in this episode at first viewing, but after my second viewing with my wife at a normal hour, I actually really loved it. And it actually really added to the tension to this sequence with this ice beast. And I heard this comparison that the music was Blade Runner-esque, and absolutely agreed, to be honest. The pulsating, dreadful droning that goes on really ramps up the tension, no matter what it is that we're looking at. The Mithril yelling at the Mandalorian to open the hatch was unnerving, as you hear that kind of animal-sounding synth. It's just like wicked good. And I love that the Mando goes into this like He-Man mode as he takes on the beast with his gun. He just electrocutes it so it stops biting at his ship. It was a pretty badass moment. We also learned that the Razor Crest is the name of the ship type rather than what the Mandalorian named his ship. At least this is what I think the exchange between the Mithril and the Mando meant. I found it interesting considering what we come to learn about the Mandalorian's origins, but we will get to that in a bit. Now, I personally really enjoy the ship's design. It's got a prequel Naboo cruiser kind of thing going on for me, with a kind of old warship crossover. Definitely a ship maybe used for a transport back in the day, but I don't know much about the ship's history or if that's readily available, so I could be wrong. But the design is very cool. And I'm almost positive that most of what we see happening with exterior shots of the ship in motion are actual motion control composites. For a person like me that's into filmmaking and editing, that's really cool. Around this part is where the episode goes back to that classic Star Wars banter. I thought the show did a good job of balancing out that dread and tension with this kind of stuff, and I swear this show is the first time I've ever seen a bathroom in Star Wars, and I thought it was hilarious. When the Mithril said he might take a while, I lost it. We also finally see all the Mandalorian's other bounty as the Mithril discovers how he typically transports who he collects. The music here gets dreadful and then bam, the Mandalorian is there and he freezes him in carbonite. Again, it goes from very funny to very intense very quickly, and I think it's paced perfectly. I think the music as the Mandalorian approaches the planet that the guild is on is unbelievable. It sounds like something out of the Dark Knight, and the setting is fantastic as usual again as we enter another one of these seedy cantina areas full of aliens up to all sorts of no good. Everyone seems to be watching everybody. Here the Mandalorian meets up with Greef Karga and throws down the bounties he's collected down on the table. And it's interesting here that we find out about the worthlessness of Imperial credits. In this post-Empire Imperial remnant time, it's really interesting to find out like how money works and seeing these new interesting forms of money. I personally haven't heard much beyond Imperial credits before, so it was really cool for somebody like me. I thought the sound design too for the calamari flan was a really nice touch. It makes it to sound really disgusting, but that little detail was awesome. And again, this show is super weird in that right kind of way. Now around this next part is where Greef Karga goes through all the bounties he has, and the Mandalorian tries to take them all for himself, but there's one that's off the books that's worth a lot more, which is essentially the beginning of the adventure for the season. There's no bounty puck involved with this job. The Mandalorian will have to meet with the person who put out the bounty. The Mandalorian takes all the information that he can from Greef Karga, and then he goes to meet with the person who put out the bounty in the first place. And I love these scenes where the Mandalorian is walking through the alleys of this world. It's very reminiscent of like Rogue One. It's full of life and a lot of things just happening in the background, and the Jawas were also one of my favorite parts here. As the Mandalorian enters an area to meet with the client, he's met with one of those security eyeball droids we've seen from Return of the Jedi, and I thought that was amazing. And when the door opens, he enters an area and he's met by a Gonk droid, and then we enter a room with stormtroopers and a man sitting down, and it's Werner Herzog's character, the client, an Imperial sympathizer or maybe an old Moff, and I'm not sure to be honest, but he wears an emblem of the Empire. I loved this whole scene. I loved everything down to the tension between the Mandalorian and the stormtroopers, to how weird Werner Herzog is as he talks to the Mandalorian. He seems so intense in a good way, but in a way that makes me feel uncomfortable. I love that this show goes in and out of intense to silly. Now, the payment for this bounty is Beskar, which I thought was really cool. The Mandalorian medal for their armor. And if I remember correctly, it can even stop some blows from lightsabers, so I imagine it's extremely precious to them. But again, I'm not too caught up with Mandalorian lore. Now, this bounty the client needs to find is a 50-year-old, and he can only give the Mandalorian limited data. And what this turns out to be is unbelievable, but we will get there soon. As the Mandalorian leaves the meeting, the music again starts ramping up tension, letting us know kind of like the dark motives in the client's character, and at least that's how I'm taking the whole scene. On second viewing, it seemed to shout out that this bounty will be something the Mandalorian hadn't ever thought that he would be faced with. So the next thing we see is a roasted monkey lizard, which was amazing. My wife laughed and I laughed when we both saw this guy. It's kind of sad but amusing at the same time, knowing how annoying these creatures can be, but you know, at the same time, you kind of love this little alien guy because he's kind of cute. But hey, maybe he's tasty. The Mandalorian enters another area in this town that's underground, and it leads to a lot of other Mandalorians, all in their armor. And I thought this was fascinating. I did not expect to see this at all. Even the children there have some kind of helmet on. The Mandalorian enters a room where another Mandalorian blacksmith is creating armor. The whole setting is beautiful, and she's standing behind this kind of forge. The music here also has this retro ancient vibe. And again, I don't know much about Mandalorian lore, but so far it's pretty obvious that they are a proud tribe of people. And I love the entire aesthetic of Mandalorians as well, especially the blacksmith's helmet. She ends up making him a pauldron out of the Beskar metal, and the two of them reflect that it was gathered in the Great Purge, and that it's good that it's back with their tribe. Now, I thought this sequence was really cool, and also kind of strangely edited, and I love this notion of foundlings and the idea that that was what the Mandalorian is, this child lost to war, saved by this tribe. And the flashbacks were pretty amazing. It's where those super battle droids came in, where we saw those in the trailers. And knowing this about the character makes his choice at the end of this episode make total sense in my eyes. And after this, he departs to the planet where the bounty is located. The shots of the ship here and the landscape are breathtaking, and the music is so intense as well. The more I watch this, the more I love the synth soundscape. And we also get to see blurs in this part of the episode, and to be honest, they came off terrifying. I thought they did a great job of selling them as real creatures. You know, it's never going to be perfect, but yeah, I think they did a really good job here. And I'm a huge fan of the Ewok movies, so seeing these in live action again was really neat. Here we meet Nick Nolte's character, who is an Ugnaught named Kuiil, and he's hilarious and super interesting, and he also saves the Mandalorian's ass. He talks in a funny way where he ends everything with, "I have spoken." He ends up helping the Mandalorian locate the bounty he is after. And I thought it was pretty cool seeing this guy's area where he lives. It was pretty neat. It kind of reminded me of Yoda's little hut on Dagobah. And not in a way of ripping that off, but, you know, in that tiny alien living in a hut giving some wisdom to a young man kind of way. It was really cool. The sequence when the Mandalorian needs to tame a blurg was very interesting. He can't get to the bounty on foot, so he will need to learn how to ride a blurg. It was super funny and also super inspiring. And I loved how the character Kuiil reminded the Mandalorian of who he is. A Mandalorian. A person whose people once rode the great mythosaur. I thought that was super cool. And the music ends up shifting to this inspiring sonic landscape of ethereal strings and flutes. It sounds hopeful, and the Mandalorian approaches the blurg as a friend now, and it ends up working out. He tames the tension of the blurg, and then he mounts it. This scene literally had me grinning like a stupid kid. And I love that it also edited in an insert of Kuiil just nodding his head like, "Yeah, he did it, nice." I thought it was so funny. Then they departed on their blurgs to the area where the bounty is located. From here, this episode got extremely intense and equally hilarious. I need to say again how impressive all the imagery has been so far in this episode. Even the Ugnaught looked real to me. Kuiil is just really impressive looking. And I know the mouth is puppeteered in some way, though there looks to be some kind of mechanics going on in there. So Kuiil ends up leaving the Mandalorian to deal with the bounty on his own, and repeats the "I have spoken" phrase, which got a laugh out of me. And I kept repeating that for a little bit after the episode. It's basically like an instant meme. Kuiil leaves the Mandalorian there on his own because of all the tales and stories he's heard about Mandalorians. He thinks they will make quick fixes of these messes, and I thought that was an interesting thing to consider about their reputation. So after this, we see that IG-88 droid kicking some serious ass, and the way he talks to anybody is hilarious. The sequence to me was pretty mesmerizing, and I cannot tell if this was CGI or puppet work, and to be honest, some of the droid's movements were weird and kind of creepy looking, like that old 80s stop animation look where it's not natural to the eye. The first interaction between the Mandalorian and the IG unit reminded me of Cassian Andor and K2SO. It was like sort of a deadpan literalness to his humor, and I thought it was really well done. From here, they get into this very deadly standoff against all these other individuals. It's almost like the battle on Jeddah in Rogue One, and the music is really dreadful. And I have to be honest, the way the IG unit takes people out during this whole battle is absolutely insane. I love the moment where the Mando yells, "Up top." The IG unit points his guns up, shoots, and the guy falls behind him. It was perfect Star Wars humor. And then after this, when they get into a real bind, the next ongoing joke with the droid starts going, where it's him trying to self-destruct over and over again. I thought it was super funny. Again, the humor is really well timed in this show, and the dread juxtaposed with the humor was really well done. I mean, I can't express enough how good this show is. Next, this gigantic gun that enters the fight, it was completely outrageous, and the music in this section was completely dreadful, like in that dread way, like the dread, suspense, tension way. And then the Mandalorian eventually takes it over, and then the music goes into this heroic theme, and he kills everybody. He ends up standing there looking at all the dead people left in his wake, and again we see the IG unit stopping another self-destruct sequence. The two of them enter an area where the life form, this bounty, is located, and they find this pod, and what happens next kinda blew my mind. And again, spoiler warning, inside was an infant of the Yoda species. It was the cutest thing I've ever seen since Babu Frick. The IG unit tries to kill it because it's part of his protocol as a bounty hunter, but the Mandalorian stops him. The Mandalorian ends up shooting the IG unit in his head, saving the Yoda baby, and they sort of reach out to one another with their fingers. I thought it was fascinating and touching because this little baby now is in a similar situation that the Mandalorian was once in. And this is where the episode ends. So yeah, this was a brilliant first episode. Not only does it look like something completely related to the Star Wars universe, but it feels completely unique in regards to its story. I don't feel like it tried to boink us over the head with nostalgia. It had its Easter eggs, of course, and it looked like Star Wars, but it worked very seamlessly and it worked really well with the story. And the visual effects were outstanding. Star Wars television is as good as the movies in my opinion. At least this episode has made me feel confident enough to say such a statement. The aliens, droids, puppets, ships all looked top notch. It was super impressive. And the second time around, the music really felt like a welcomed addition to the Star Wars family. It's definitely different, but it works. The sense of dread some of these scenes have are very intense, and it's absolutely enhanced because of the music. And some of the quieter scenes have really beautiful sounds popping in and out, and it feels very ethereal at times. I thought it ended up being really cool. The implications for why an Imperial remnant will want this Yoda baby is very interesting. I wonder if it means their species are inherently gifted in the Force and therefore impose a threat on their future goals of restructuring some new empire. But either way, I love the bond between the Mandalorian, a foundling himself, a kid lost to war, and this other youngling, this little cute green Yoda baby, reaching out with his finger. I thought it was brilliant. And Dave Filoni's directorial debut for live action was great. Some areas of this episode had some strange editorial choices, but that's just my personal nitpicking. This was top-notch Star Wars in my opinion, and I absolutely cannot wait for the next episode. So this is my recap, thoughts, and review on the first episode of The Mandalorian. What did you guys think of The Mandalorian's first episode? And sorry to all of you guys that haven't been able to watch it yet. Definitely don't watch this at all. I hope that you didn't if you haven't seen it yet. It's worth the wait. And I'm excited to see all of your thoughts down below in the comments. May the Force be with you. AT-AT is signing off.